Some say Trump was the most unpredictable president in modern history. Others call him a misunderstood genius. But what few realize is that behind every impulsive phrase lay a strategy for impact. He understood something traditional politicians never dared admit. Power belongs not to the wisest, but to the one with the greatest grasp of perception. And it was thus, amid controversy and applause, that he redefined the way the world views war, peace, and hegemony. While leaders tried to maintain the old global order, Trump broke the script and transformed international politics into an emotional chessboard. He spoke of peace using the tone of war, and threatened war in the name of peace. The world, perplexed, didn't know whether to applaud or fear. In just a few years, he exposed something that had always been hidden. Alliances are fragile, speeches are weapons, and diplomacy is, at its core, a game of survival. But the big question continues to echo. To what extent can a man challenge the system without becoming part of it? The decisions he made still shape economies, borders, and mindsets. And, whether you love him or hate him, it's impossible to ignore the trail he left. Because, ultimately, understanding Trump is understanding the new era of power, where wars are fought with words, and peace is just another form of conquest. There comes a time when the silence of an office speaks louder than 1,000 speeches. A president, isolated behind armored doors, faces the weight of a pen that could change the course of history. Trump knew this solitude well. The cameras showed confidence, but behind the scenes there were calculations, divided advisors, and a clock that never stopped demanding decisions. It's curious how the world sees only the final gesture, the signature, and ignores the abyss of doubt that precedes it. In power, there are no absolute right or wrong. There are consequences. Every decree can save jobs or generate sanctions, protect borders or provoke retaliation. The presidential chair is, at once, a throne and a trap. It's easy to judge from the outside, but difficult to imagine the sound of one's own name echoing in global headlines. Trump has learned that leadership is like playing chess with pieces that scream, suffer, and resist. And with each move, the entire board reacts. Think about it. When a decision is made in the Oval Office, it reverberates in factories, barracks, and dinner tables halfway around the world. A speech can send stock markets plummeting. An order can light fires or stop gunfire. It's a power that fascinates and terrifies at the same time, and those who wield it rarely sleep peacefully. Ultimately, perhaps the true test of a leader isn't in acting, but in bearing the weight of their own choices, and following through, even as the world watches, waiting for the next move. There's a battlefield few see. No tanks, no soldiers, just encrypted phones, secret meetings, and calculated glances. It's on this silent terrain that diplomacy moves. Trump understood early on that strength isn't always in pulling the trigger, but in making the enemy believe you could do so at any moment. He played with threats and smiles, with tweets that sounded like warning shots. And in the apparent chaos, there was method, a choreography of power. When a leader mixes provocation with pragmatism, it creates a respectable kind of fear. Trump used this formula with North Korea, Iran, and even NATO allies. While some called him unpredictable, others called him a strategist. Every sanction, every calculated gesture of rapprochement was part of a larger struggle, to show the world that the United States still dictated the global game. It was a shadow game, where brute force gave way to psychological influence. And, curiously, the public saw only the spectacle, the fiery speeches, the headlines, the nightly tweets. But behind the scenes, generals, diplomats, and businessmen vied for space to shape the outcome of each move. Sometimes peace was negotiated as coldly as a commercial contract. Other times, war was merely a bargaining chip. Trump knew that true power lies not only in weapons, but in the ability to use them without having to fire. And that's where the game becomes dangerous. Because not everyone masters the art of bluffing without losing control. While great leaders gather in luxurious rooms, another side of the world feels the consequences without any invitation. A sanction that seems simple in a decree can mean the closure of factories, the increase in the price of bread, or the shortage of medicine in a hospital. When Trump pressed the pen, a worker in the Middle East, a farmer in Latin America, or a mother in Eastern Europe felt the reflection of that ink. Power is fascinating, until the moment it ceases to be a symbol and becomes a scar. Every political decision generates invisible ripples that cross borders and change destinies. Soldiers sent to distant bases, journalists censored under reinforced regimes, children growing up under nighttime sirens. American foreign policy under Trump mixed protection and punishment, and in both cases, someone always paid the price. It's easy to forget that behind the graphs and economic indexes lie faces, voices, and families struggling to survive the echo of a distant discourse. But the curious thing is that, even in the face of suffering, hope always finds a way to infiltrate. In refugee camps, teachers emerge to improvise. Schools. In destroyed cities, merchants reopen shops with what's left. Humanity has an admirable stubbornness. It insists on flourishing where power has tried to devastate. And perhaps it is precisely this silent resistance that defies the cold calculations of the powers that be, reminding the powerful that, no matter how much they dominate the world, they will never dominate the human heart. Every empire, sooner or later, faces the mirror of its own decay. Trump took office amid this uncomfortable reflection, an America that still saw itself as a beacon of the world, but already felt the rising light of other powers: China, Russia, India. He knew that supremacy is not maintained with speeches of freedom, but with economic and military dominance. Therefore, he transformed foreign policy into a trade war, and every tariff imposed on China was a message: we still rule here. But hegemony is a treacherous concept. The more a country tries to reassert its greatness, the more it arouses resistance. The promise of America First rekindled national pride, but it also isolated allies and drew closer rivals. Tensions with NATO and the European Union revealed the paradox of an empire that wanted to be respected, but not questioned. It was the old Roman dilemma repeated in a modern version: maintaining global dominance while the world changes too rapidly to control. Even so, Trump believed he was waging a spiritual battle, a war for American identity. He spoke of sovereignty as if he were speaking of faith, and of borders as if he were speaking of temples. This rhetoric resonated with millions who feared losing their place in the world. The problem is that the power that protects can also blind. And in seeking to prove that the United States remained on top, he may have reignited something greater than he expected. A new cycle of struggles that would once again transform the map of global power. Behind every presidential speech, there's a symphony of invisible voices, playing their own notes. Presidents sign, but rarely make decisions alone. Trump, for all his talk of independence and unpredictability, was also surrounded by lobbyists, advisors, and tycoons who saw the White House as a platform of opportunities. True power rarely appears on camera. It operates in the shadows, in off-the-record meetings where billion-dollar deals are sealed with a handshake and a restrained smile. Defense companies, energy conglomerates, financial groups, all trying to shape decisions that would move billions. Every military decision could mean contracts, and every economic sanction, new markets for a privileged few. Trump knew this game, and on many occasions used it to his advantage. But there's a dangerous line between governing and being governed. And that's where power becomes a refined illusion. Those who appear to command are often just the face of a machine operating on their own. While people debated tweets and headlines, the real chess game was taking place out of sight. A dinner at Mar-a-Lago could be worth more than 1,000 speeches in Congress. And so politics became confused with theater, a spectacle in which the audience applauds without knowing who wrote the script. In the end, perhaps the greatest trick of power is precisely this: making the world believe that the protagonist is in charge, when, in fact, they are also a pawn in a much larger game, a game that few understand and almost no one controls. In the end, what truly defines a leader: visible results or hidden intentions. Trump ended his term amid praise and accusations, seen by some as a peacemaker who prevented new wars, and by others as an arsonist who quietly stoked the flames. The paradox is fascinating. Under his administration, the United States didn't start major conflicts, yet the global climate never seemed so heated. He understood that peace is often just a pause between two strategies. The signing of agreements in the Middle East was presented as a historic victory, but behind the scenes, another scenario was being pointed out: a shift in interests, the containment of enemies, and the manipulation of narratives. Peace, after all, can also be a political weapon. Every handshake in front of the cameras was a reminder that global stability is rarely the result of kindness, but rather calculation. Trump knew how to use symbols like few others. Flags, anthems, and promises became tools of emotional influence over the world and his own people. And perhaps that's what makes his legacy so controversial. He left an ideological scar on the world. His decisions, however polarizing, revealed something few had the courage to admit: that modern hegemony is built not only with weapons, but with narratives. The war is now fought on screens, on networks, and in perceptions. Trump may have left the White House, but the battles he started continue, invisible, digital, and silent, shaping the destiny of a generation still trying to understand whether they are living in times of peace or merely the prelude to the next storm. Ultimately, understanding power is understanding human nature, its ambitions, fears, and limits. Trump may have stepped down from center stage, but the echoes of his decisions still reverberate throughout the world. Every choice he makes carries a lesson about leadership, influence, and the price of challenging the system. And perhaps that's the question that remains: what would you do if you had the power to change the course of things? Would you face chaos or hide behind convenience? Because it's easy to criticize other people's decisions, but it's harder to recognize how, on a smaller scale, we also make decisions that shape the destinies around us, at work, in our families, in our relationships. History teaches us that every action, no matter how small, has an invisible impact. And if leaders create wars or treaties, we create environments of peace or conflict within our own lives. The question is, what kind of power have you cultivated? If this reflection has made you see the world differently, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and continue following this journey. Here, each episode goes beyond the headlines. It delves into the finer points of power, the decisions that shape the planet, and the stories that time tries to hide. War may be far away, but knowledge is the weapon you carry now.